We're going to talk about the number one seed in the NFC. Those are the Philadelphia Eagles. And here with me to talk about the Eagles is longtime Eagles fan, Justin Watson. Thank you so much for being on the show, Justin.
Thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure and an honor.
The question I normally ask fans when I do this line of questioning is, how did you become an Eagles fan, and how long have you been an Eagles fan?
So how did I become an Eagles fan? That's an interesting question. I really don't know how to answer it honestly, but it would probably be my dad kind of made me be an Eagles fan, right? He introduced me to all the sports that I'm into, and he was an Eagles fan, so I just kind of gravitated towards the Eagles, and I've been an Eagles fan forever. I can remember like Randall Cunningham, like that was my first memory of being an Eagles fan, just Randall Cunningham, the ultimate weapon, and the Buddy Ryan defenses that people to this day still talk about here in Philadelphia. So, those are really kind of my earliest and fondest memories, some of the fondest memories of being an Eagles fan.
What is the most memorable Eagles moment? I'm assuming it's Nick Foles leading the Eagles to the Super Bowl over New England. I can't think of anything else that's even comparable to that.
No, there's nothing that compares to that whatsoever. That entire Super Bowl game is forever etched in my mind. The Philly special, Philly, they always talk about that here. And, just the strip sack fumble, Brandon Graham stripping Tom Brady, and just all the things that happened. And even when it happened, even when that last play and that ball hit the ground, I think it's the Philly fan mentality. I was waiting for there to be like a flag or a whistle or something that says, no, this game isn't over yet. But that's probably one of my fondest memories. And that's like an easy answer, right? But when I really think of some of the fondest memories, 4th and 26 is a big one. In the playoff, Donovan McNabb to Freddie Mitchell, 4th and 26 against the Green Bay Packers. Randall Cunningham punting the ball out of the end zone against, I think it was against the Cowboys, I can't remember if it was the Cowboys or the Bills. So I guess that memory is not as great. But, that Super Bowl, I think probably stands out in every real Eagles fan's mind.
What were the expectations coming into the season for the Eagles? I know Nick Sirianni heading into year 2 as head coach. What were you expecting? What were you hoping some of the big changes would be?
Honestly, like as a fan, I was just expecting them to be a little better, to look a little better than they did last year, right? They made the playoffs last year. They kind of squeaked in there, kind of squeezed there, snuck their way in there. This year, I felt like playoffs will be great, but I want to see them look better than they did. And honestly, on one of the podcasts that I do, we kind of predicted the season. We went through game by game and predicted the season. And I predicted them to be 12-5 during that show, even though I didn't really feel like that was a reality. I predicted them to be 12-5. They end up 14-3. Wasn't too far off, but the way we got there, I had them losing like 4 straight games first half of the season. But I did not expect them to be as good as they were. To be honest with you, still feels like a dream that they're as good as they are right now. But 12-5 was like my prediction. And I just really wanted to see them look better than they did last year.
Which game made you feel extremely confident of that the Eagles are going to the playoffs? Was it the win over Dallas? Was it any other particular game that stood out in your mind? Was it the trouncing of the Vikings?
So this answer may surprise you. It wasn't the win against Dallas because we know Dallas, Dak Prescott wasn't playing, and we don't even know if that's an advantage at this point right now, right? I guess that's a little shot at Dallas. The Vikings game, even though it was such a blowout, it was still so very early in the season, right? So I kind of just take that with a grain of salt. Surprisingly enough, it was the game against the Packers because they get out to like a 14-0 lead quick in the game. And then they gave it right back. And then you turn around and you see how they back and forth, Green Bay was kind of starting to come into their own at that time. Didn't think they would be making the playoffs, and they didn't, but they got awful close. Aaron Rodgers started looking like Aaron Rodgers, and then he got hurt, and the Eagles were able to shut that door. And honestly, you didn't see that a lot with this Eagles team up to that part of the season, them really shutting the door when they needed to shut a door against a team that was playing well. And at that point, I felt like the Packers were playing well. They were playing for their season. And once they were able to shut that door, I started internally feeling more confident in the team, more confident in the Eagles as them being one of the better teams in the league.
While going out to such a strong start to the season, it wasn't a question that you were worried about the team making the playoffs, but was there a particular game that had you worried? Was it that second game against Washington? Was it some other game in there that maybe gave you a little bit of a pause of how well they could play in the playoffs?
There was, well, the first game, I would say there was more than one, right? But and it was kind of like a conglomerate. But the first game I would say that had me worried was the game against the Colts, because as we know, the Colts were not playing good football, and the Eagles were. And this was one of the games that, as a fan, you expected the Eagles to go in there, establish their dominance, push the Colts around a little bit, get out of there with the victory, and probably rest some people in the fourth quarter. And that didn't happen at all. And then the game against Dallas gave me pause, the loss, and the loss against New Orleans. Even though in those games Jalen Hurts was not the starting quarterback, it was very possible that Jalen Hurts would not be coming back. So you had to pay attention to what Gardner Minshew was doing. So it was those games and the game against the Bears where Eagles had no business struggling against the Bears, in my opinion. People say, well, it was really cold out there and all like that. That doesn't matter to me. It's cold for both teams. So it was kind of the Colts game, the Bears game, and then, of course, two of the losses. That Commanders game that they lost, I felt like that was just one of them games where, outside of a couple missed calls as a fan, that was just a game where the Commanders just kind of dominated. They came in there with the game plan, executed, and they just kind of kicked our butts up and down the field. But it was the way the Eagles played. I still felt they played hard. I still felt like they were in the game. The other games, the Colts games, the Saints game, the Cowboys games, and the Bears game, those are the games that made me worry and still are in the back of my mind to this day going into the playoffs.
Even though the brackets are set and a few games have already come through, who do you feel that the Eagles matched up the best with in the NFC playoff bracket?
I would probably say, the way it's looking right now, I would probably say the Giants. But the problem is they've seen each other twice already, and we know beating somebody 3 times is very difficult to do. But I feel like the front four of the Eagles defense is better than the offensive line of the Giants, and they can get pressure on Daniel Jones. If they're able to get pressure on Daniel Jones, then, you know, your secondary's job becomes a little bit easier. And we do have a very good secondary with Bradbury and Slay back there, holding it down. Now, Slay had some, over the last few weeks, he had some plays where he got beat, but that's going to happen. But I feel like the Giants in that game that is a matchup now, I feel like the Eagles have probably their best comparison, their best matchup against the New York Giants.
Looking at some of the teams that may give you concern as an Eagles fan, did a team like Minnesota, even though they were eliminated by the Giants, did they worry you? Is it San Francisco? Is it potentially Dallas? Is it Tom Brady because it's Tom Brady? Who gives you concerns as an Eagles fan?
Honestly, as a fan right now, I think my biggest concern would probably be the Niners, San Francisco 49ers. I feel like they are on a roll. I think they've won like 11 straight games at this point, counting the playoff game. They're playing at the top of their game. Their backfield with McCaffrey and Samuels can be outstanding, and they can split them both out wide. Like, their offense is so dynamic with Kyle Shanahan, being the coach, being the mastermind behind that. Their offense is so dynamic, and they can do so many different things. That worries me. And then they have a very physical defense. I mean, they are legitimately the other best team in the NFC, in my opinion. And if those two teams collide, man, that's not the team I want to see the Eagles play, but I'm sure any Eagle player tell you they'll play anybody, right? But that's the one team that I'm like, ooh, this could be a tough one. This could be an extremely tough one. This could even be a L.
I know going into the season, it's full year two of the Jalen Hurts experience. I know them deciding to forego not only Nick Foles and Carson Wentz, but making Jalen Hurts the primary quarterback. There had to be a lot of maybe concerns from last year going into this year that you were hoping to see rectified. What have you seen so far from a healthy Jalen Hurts?
I've seen great decision making. Some of the decisions that he was making last year with this offense, you've seen him kind of fall into the role of being the prepared quarterback and making the right decision a majority of the time. I think last year when you saw Jalen Hurts, he was just kind of going off instinct where he was trying to either find the perfect play and maybe sometimes holding the ball too long or overthrowing the ball, being anxious. This year I'm seeing a patient, more refined Jalen Hurts with spectacular decision making, and he just does not make many mistakes at all with the ball. You could probably count all his mistakes with one hand, and I think he has maybe 3 or 4 interceptions this year, which is hard to do. And 2 of those were actually in somebody's hand on his team before they ended up in the hands of another team. So I think the growth of Jalen Hurts from last year to this year has been amazing, and it's really been the biggest reason the Eagles have had this success that they had this year.
Looking at the prediction for the Super Bowl, who do you have coming out of the NFC? Who do you have coming out of the AFC? Who wins the game, and what is the final score? So,
in my biased opinion, of course, I got to say the Eagles are coming out of the NFC, right? I got to. Out of the AFC is so tough right now. It's so interesting over there. You got the Bengals, you got the Bills, you got the Chiefs. And right now you got the Jaguars who are playing some pretty good football. I would love to see like Andy Reid or Doug Peterson go to the Super Bowl this year and play against the Eagles. But I'm going to say in the AFC, it's going to be the Bills are playing off a lot of emotion too, right? I'm going to say it's going to be the Chiefs this year. I think the Chiefs get into it against the Eagles, and I'm going to say the Eagles win that game 27-17.
I remember after Kansas City won the Super Bowl, and I was still living in Delaware, and all you could hear in Philadelphia sports talk, it still felt, even with Andy Reid, it's like the ex-girlfriend that got away. I don't know why, but I mean, because he coached them well for several years, and really one bad season I think really did him in. And then there's the Chip Kelly experiment, and then everything else that and then Doug Peterson and all that. I just I feel like maybe some people would see it as a way, oh, let's stick it to Andy one more time type thing. I don't know.
No, I think Andy Reid, logistically, technically, statistically, greatest coach in Philadelphia history, greatest coach in Philadelphia Eagles history. When it was time for him to go, it was time for him to go. It wasn't because he was a bad coach. He was still a good coach. I just think there comes a time when, a new voice is needed. And as sorry as I was to see him go, because I understood that he's a great coach and he's done great things in Kansas City as well, been to 2 Super Bowls, won one. I felt like it was probably time for a new voice in that locker room. And we saw Chip Kelly in there, and Chip Kelly had some success. Let me not just dog Chip Kelly. He had some success. But by like year 3, they had him out of there before the season was over. And then you get Doug Peterson. He came in, he did his thing. And I think some people, in fact, it's probably like 50-50. In Philadelphia, we like seeing Andy Reid and Doug Peterson be successful. Some people could care less. I like seeing them be successful. So, like you said, this is kind of like your ex-girlfriend doing something good. Like, oh, that's good for you. Okay, but it means nothing for me. But it almost feels like if the Eagles were not good this year and Doug and Andy were having success, guarantee you a lot of people here in Philly would be rooting for Doug or Andy going forward throughout the playoffs.
It's funny. I think I heard with the Chip Kelly thing, what really did him in is that he made them reschedule the holiday party. And I heard someone said, Jeffrey Lurie said, this will never happen again. And that led to the firing. It's like, again, that was the call. They were going to give him another year, and you made me reschedule this big holiday party that we had every year. And that was
wow. That's actually the first time I've heard that.
I heard that up there. I think that was like, let's see. Because I was working up there, started 2015. So that was right in the middle of the Chip Kelly experiment.
Let's put it this way. I know you probably have more insider information than me, so I'm going to go with what you said.
How much substantiated, I don't know. But weirder people have been fired for weirder things than a holiday party.
That's true. That is true.
They didn't even do anything. I was like, no, you made me reschedule this. Because I hear they do, like, I heard it was like, they do big, elaborate holiday parties, and the fact that they had to reschedule because he wanted them to, or something else, that was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. They're probably going to stick with them again, even this, aside from that struggle in year 3.
Well, a lot of the story was he wasn't well liked within the building.
Yeah,
not just from the higher up. I'm talking about cafeteria staff. Like, just nobody was really fond of him.
Yeah, and I think that attitude, and you do that to force a hand to move something that the owner puts on every year. Yep, I can see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we wrap this up, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this. Want to know if you had any shout outs that you wanted to give, anything you wanted to promote, and what are ways people can reach out to you to talk not only Philadelphia Eagles football, Philadelphia sports in general, and baseball in general.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's been an honor, and anytime, Earl. I'm just telling you right now, anytime, and you know this. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at JWatsonRadioMan, JWatsonRadioman. Instagram and Twitter. You could follow my channel on YouTube, New Twist Radio. Subscribe, appreciate it. And I do want to give a shout out to all my Eagles fans out there, and shout out to Blue Demon Athletics, nonprofit that I work with in Delaware, making an impression on the youth and helping Delawareans be healthier of all ages. So I just want to put that out there. But yeah, like, shout out to you, Earl. You're doing things out here, man. I love seeing Hawk alum like yourself doing the things you're doing, man, and keep on pushing and keep on doing the good work.